Malcolm with Marble Fox Studios. This video is to show you how to work with the sheet that I created so you can figure out how you want to manage your wealth after the mother of all short squeezes is done. So let's dive right into it. All right, so the first thing that you will want to do is you will want to copy the sheet so you can start playing around with it. Because this sheet that we're looking at right here, this is the template sheet, and I'm the only one that's allowed to edit it. Because if anybody was allowed to edit it, then nobody would be able to get anything done, and things would break pretty much immediately. So you want to make your own copy so that nobody else can mess with what you're planning for. If you have any questions about it after this video, feel free to direct message me on Twitter at mjburtonshaw5. If I can answer your questions really quickly, I will just do so. If it's going to require a bit more time for me to answer your question, we can discuss me setting up a consultation with you, and we can discuss rates and all that if you need a bit more of a complex solution. So the first rule with this sheet is if it is not in white, do not overwrite. So any cell that is shaded in gray is a formula, and it's something that you shouldn't change. It's something that I've automatically calculated for you, so you don't need to worry about it. Whereas if something is in white, it's just a static value, and you are free to change that to whatever values that you need to. Rule number 2 is we have the 2021 tax bracket right here. Don't touch this unless you know exactly what you're doing and you understand how the tax brackets work. And this is just for 2021. Things might change in 2022. So if you're going to be using this for future use, then I think you can just go to, you would just Google search 2022 tax brackets, and if there's any changes from there. And I'll cover where this is used and why it's important not to change it later in this video. Rule number 3 is that you need to put the mask over your own face before you help others, just like on an airplane. Because you can't help others until you yourself are in a position to do so. This sheet because of that principle, this sheet will take into account your goals first before allocating funds to other people. So those are the big 3 rules. Other than that, let's dive into the technicals here. So this green table that we have here is the capital table. This is all revolves around how much money are you going to generate from the short squeeze. So the target for you. The target for you, this column just takes everything here, and if you want to create like a what if scenario, that's what you would do here. So let's say you only have 100 shares, and you have it, or let me undo that. So let's say you just have 5,000 shares, and you can assume that the tax rate is going to be 37%. And then this minimum for you, what that is that will state this is the minimum amount of money I want to keep for myself. Essentially, I want at least $20 million before I start giving money away to anybody else. So you can change this to whatever amount you want. You can change that to $5 million. 1, 2, 3, that's 50,000. That's 5 million. So if you change that to 5 million, then it will automatically take into account this tax rate and how many shares you have. And this sell price is what is the big thing you're looking for in this column. Because if you want to have $5 million left for you, and you assume you're going to be taxed at a 37% tax rate, and you have 5,000 shares, then your target sell price would need to be $1,587.30 at minimum to get to this amount right here. But let me change this back to 20 million. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then this actual column, the only two things you need to worry about here are just the sell price and the number of shares that you have. The tax rate is automatically calculated in this big gross formula that grabs everything from this tax bracket, and it essentially takes this number, runs it through the tax bracket, and it gives you the amount of taxes you'll be paying if you were to sell this many shares at this price. And then it will leave you with a net profit, and then your minimum for you, and then your maximum for other people. Now, this target for others, you can effectively ignore this information. It just helps me to calculate, to aggregate the data for the different categories of stuff that you want to donate to. But since this entire column is in gray, you can essentially ignore it. It's all formulas. You don't need to worry about it. So the next thing we will get into is the sharing table. So here you have different categories. So you have parents, siblings, nibblings, and fun fact, a nibbling is a single word to describe a niece or a nephew, hence the N at the beginning, nibbling. Friends, and then causes. And then here you can set out like, hey, this is how much money I want to give to each person. So with what you're filling out here, don't worry about the minimum for you, because let's say we set this all to 0. So if we set this all to 0, the minimum for you would be $20 million. It says that you would need to sell at this price to reach that. And and since you don't have anything set aside for donations, then the target for others is the same as it is for you, because you will be keeping all of the money if you don't set aside anything for anything else. So, so let's say for your parents, you want to give them $10 million each. So if you want to give each of your parents $10 million each, what it will do is it will go down here, look for everything that has parents as the category, and then for each parent it finds, which here we have 4 because you have your mom, your dad, and then if you're married, you have your mother-in-law and your father-in-law if you want to give that to them. So here it would need like, hey, for the parents category, if we're giving $10 million to each parent, we found 4 parents inside of this table. So we need to set aside, or we need to account for $40 million to give them. And then what that does is that plugs that into the maximum for others, and it gives you an adjusted selling price in order to make sure that you have enough money to actually give that out. But not before it pays you out first. It pays you out, and then it'll pay out everything else. And so, let's say if you want to give $1 million to each sibling, and siblings here, we have 2 siblings inside of this table. 1 times 2 equals 2 million, and it will add that. 2 million plus 40 million gives you 42 million, adds that here, and then it does the reverse calculation to adjust your target price for others to make sure you'll actually have that money after taxes to hand out to them. You can do the same thing for nibblings, for friends, for causes. And for the most part, I think everything will fit into one of those categories. But if you do need to add an entirely new category, what you can do is you can add a row. You do that just by if you're on a computer, you can do that by right-clicking the row itself. Hit insert one below or above, I would prefer that you do below. It'll be easier to manage. And then you can say new category, whatever that category is. And then the maximum for each, this stays white, so you can make it whatever you want. But then you have to fill in the rest of this gray with the formulas. And the way that you do that is you click and drag over to the last row that has the formulas written out, and then you click and hold this blue square right here, and then you drag it down, and when you release, it will it will drag the formulas down. And let's see why that is divided by 0. I think we have to. I think you also have to change something here. So let's check that. So yes, and let's check. Nope, no formula, no formula. So you also need. So if you do add a category, you do need to change the % share in this last row to instead of the sum of E14 through E18. You need to change that to E19. And then, let's see, you don't need to change this. And let's see what's going on here. Oh, gotcha. And the reason why it says divided by 0 here is because new category isn't found inside of this list. But if we were to add something like bananas, I want a lot of bananas after the squeeze, and you were to put this as the new category, match evaluation, what's going on there? That's another thing. So another thing is, if you need to add a column, go up to this very top gray box here that's underneath the U category, change the index, this purple phrase right here. Instead of F14 through F18, you'll want to make sure, and this is F14 through F18 right here, you want to change that to 19 or whatever row that you're at. And then after you change that first one, grab this blue box, drag it all the way down to the bottom. That did not work. Let's find out why. It is because you need to do you need to do the F19, but you also need to change the B to B19 as well. I think that should do it. Bingo. And now our formula is fixed. So there we go. Right, so moving on. That's how the share table works. All this and all this information in the gray, you can ignore it if you want to. I just keep it there visible just in case you're a numbers person and you want to know like where all the numbers are coming from, and if you're good with formulas, you can see how all that works. So here, into the one-time expenses, let's break this down one at a time. So this first row, this trust row, which is in the U category, that is very important that you don't change this, because this directly feeds into another sheet. What this trust does is it takes the actual minimum for you, and it finds everything with a category that says you, and it subtracts the sum of all of this from this, and whatever's left over goes into the trust. And you'll see why that's important later, very soon. So for things that are one-time expenses for you, so you have your initial stock investment. Let's say it was $50,000. You want to pay off your debt. Let's say you want to set aside some stuff into a savings account, angel investments, set aside something for a really nice house, voluntary medical procedures. Maybe you want to get a nose job, or you need liposuction. Or you just need something that is not voluntary. Maybe it's medical debt that you need to pay off too. It can be whatever. You can. I've got a slot here for your car. Where's the Lambo? And a celebration vacation as well. I think that's something. I think these are all very common things that most people would account for. But if you want to add things for yourself, you can just insert more rows. Let's see what that's. Another thing I want is I want an F-150 Lightning. That's what I want. That would be really cool. Just make sure that the category says you. Let's see, I've merged these. So to merge a cell, you just select the two cells that are together, and then you come up here, merge cells, click that button, boom, there you go. And an F-150 Lightning, the one that I want, I think is going to be like $90,000. So 1, 2, 3, that's $90,000. And now watch as after I hit enter, the amount that goes into this trust will decrease by $90,000, as evidenced right there. So that's how you add things into the U category, and you can, and this is white, so you can literally rename these to whatever you want. Here, when we get into the anything that's not you goes below this because it uses these formulas. So let's say like, oh, I forgot, I made a new friend. Their name is Rothgarth Bookman III, and they are a friend, so they go into the friends category. And then if I have things, let's say I want to give like $1,000 to each friend, and then all of a sudden anything that's categorized as friends gets $1,000. And the great thing about this is that the categories don't need to be next to each other, so you can be as disorganized as you want in this section, because the friends, you can still see, gets $1,000 here because of the formula. If you do run out of room here, you can just add more rows, make sure that you merge any of these cells, and then you can just take the last cell that has a value here and just drag down the formula to make sure it gets filled out. So that is how the one-time expenses work. All right. Also very important to note that before we leave this sheet and go into the long-term sheet, that the taxes cell here, do not touch these, because these mess, yeah, don't touch anything that has to do with the tax bracket unless you're like if you're not an Excel wizard, don't touch it. That's all I gotta say, because I don't want to fix it for you because it works perfectly as is. So, all right, let's move over into the long-term sheet. So the first table here is savings, and so the first column that we have here is a trust, and so the first thing that we have here is the rate. This is the interest rate or the dividend rate of the type of account that you have. Let's say that your trust has a rate of 2.25% per year. Number of periods, that's just the name of the formula. What this is this is the number of years that you're gonna let this grow, and you want to see the dividends for. And payment amount needs to at least have $1 in it. It can't be empty, otherwise the formula does really weird stuff. What the payment amount is, it's more applicable to something like an IRA. This is like, hey, this is how much the payment amount is. This is how much new money I'm going to put into the account every year. And so for an IRA, my wife and I, we're going to be putting in $13,000 a year. That's the maximum amount that we can, that we're legally allowed to put into that. So that's what we have there. And our IRA, we're planning on letting that vest for 37 years. But the IRA's interest rate is much higher, so you get much higher returns, but you're capped at $6,500 per person per year to contribute to that. Now, what the present value is, the present value is the initial investment. It is when you open the account, it's how much money are you going to put, do you put into it as soon as you open it. And for the IRA, that is zero. And for the savings, it grabs that value from here. This right here, the trust, whatever is left over from the minimum for you, minus your projected one-time expenses, whatever's left over gets ported over into the present value here. The payment due, I just have it at the end. Essentially, it's just like, hey, are you going to pay, are you going to contribute this money at the beginning of the year or the end of the year? It makes a really, really small difference, and the default is the end of the year, so I would just keep it there. You can change it to beginning, but it's a minimal difference, and it's probably just going to end up being the end anyway. So I wouldn't touch it if I were you. But if you know more about it than I do, I just built the formula. I don't disclosure. I'm not a financial advisor. I have no clue like what really how this works. I just found the formula and I plugged everything in. So now this received is at what this does is it takes the money that you started with, and then over the number of years, it figures out how much dividends you're going to get out of it, adds the dividends to the initial investment, and that's what the received is. It's the total of what you'll have after this many number of years. For the trust, I put it at 1, so you can figure out like, hey, after like every year, if I were to take out all my dividends after a single year, that's why I have it at 1, is so I can figure out how much money is my trust going to give me every year. And then the dividends is just the difference between the initial investment and the total vested amount at the end. And this is when we get into the recurring income. So the first thing here is the interval. So the interval defaults to a year, so you can see like, hey, how much money am I going to make out of my trust every year? You can also adjust this to, I'm curious to see how much I'm going to have a month, or how much I'm going to have every week. How much money am I making every minute with the dividends on my trust, if you are just curious. But for the most part, you'll probably use year or month for the most part. I would stick with year. The interval number, that is just, it just translates. So a year is 1, a month is 12, a week is 52. You get it. And then you get your gross dividends, and your dividends are taxed when you take them out. They are taxed as income tax, and so they go through the 2021 tax bracket. Again, anything that says taxes, do not touch it, because I don't want to fix it for you. It already works perfect. Don't touch it. And I'm back. So the next thing is your net dividends. This is highlighted because it's very important. This is the number that you're probably looking for. This is how much money that your trust is going to give you in dividends every year or month, if you change it to month, after taxes. This is your play money that you can have, that you can live off of. And down here, this is where we get into recurring expenses. So you can put things here like home insurance, property tax, utilities. I put everything down here that most people I think would have. You want to put down the monthly cost for that down here. And it's very important that you figure out what the monthly cost is going to be, because the interval cost would be So home insurance would be $720 per year. That's the interval. If you change this to month, then then whatever's in the red here should match whatever you have in the white here. So don't change the red. You can change the white to whatever you want. So you can change that to $80, and then it would change to $80, and then here. And it automatically does the calculation for you, but feel free to change whatever is in the white to whatever you want. You can rename things whatever you want. But yeah, that is rule number one. If it is in white, do not overwrite. So that is the gist of the short-term and long-term. There's just one last thing here. It's just a cost per share, just trying to figure out on average how much you paid for your investment. And you can figure this out by going to your broker. Your broker should automatically tell you what this is, but if you have shares across, if you have open positions with different brokers, you can put everything into here. So you can say like, hey, I paid $11 per share, and the number of shares I bought was like 50 shares, and it'll automatically figure out and calculate your average price per share that you calculated. This is not used anywhere else inside of the sheet, so this is just standalone. But yeah, so that is the instructional video. Again, if you have any questions, send me a direct message on Twitter at mjburtonshaw5, and I will help you as best I can. Best of luck in the markets.